In this video, I'm going to show you how to write a beautiful thesis using LaTeX. And I don't mean the actual content of the thesis, that's up to you. What I mean here is how do you take that content, put it into a document, and actually beautifully display it. For example, this is my thesis, and there's lots of equations and paragraphs and figures structured like bibliographies and references and appendices. How do you take all of that and make one beautiful document? So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Now, if you're a complete beginner to LaTeX, that's totally fine. I actually have 2 previous videos that introduce LaTeX from the very beginning, so check those out down in the description. But in this video, we're going to build on that to talk about all the different components that are relevant for writing a thesis. Now, if you're on the fence about whether you should even use LaTeX for your thesis, like do you want to learn this whole markup language, or do you just want to try it with Microsoft Word? Well, it depends a little bit on your discipline. For example, I'm in mathematics, and it's just standard that pretty much everybody writes their theses in mathematics because LaTeX is just so powerful for being able to display equations. But if you're in many other disciplines, I still encourage you to try and consider writing LaTeX for your theses. It's just so powerful at being able to tightly control a consistent look over your entire thesis, to keep track of things like numbering, and to have a precise control over exactly how you want it to look. LaTeX is just totally worth it in my view, particularly if you're investing the time to actually write a thesis. Now, to get started in LaTeX, you need to have some sort of LaTeX editor. Now, there's a lot of LaTeX editors out there, but the one that I've really enjoyed for the last several years is Overleaf. And actually, I'm really proud that they have become the sponsor of today's video. Because Overleaf is one that you don't have to install anything, it's all based in your web browser, everything's stored inside of the cloud, and it just makes it so much easier to learn and to create in LaTeX. And it's up to you. It has a completely free version, which I actually appreciate is really good. Like, you can write your entire thesis in LaTeX, you don't need to upgrade. But it also has some really nice quality of life upgrades, like keeping track of a whole bunch of different versions and sharing with all of your collaborators, like for example, your thesis advisors. And so for me at least, upgrading to the paid versions is totally worth it, but I'll leave that choice up to you. Okay, with those preliminaries said and done, let's get into the video. Before I even create a new project, I'm actually just gonna create a new folder here. I'll call this YouTube, and this allows me to put everything related to a thesis, which might be many, many different files, all in one nice folder. Come up here and we are gonna start a brand new project. And there's a couple options. We're actually in this video going to use a blank project. Like, we're gonna start from the beginning and I'm gonna show you how to do everything, but it's often nice if you scroll down here, you can see some of the templates that are available on the LaTeX website. So for example, for thesis, if I show the gallery of all items, your university may well have a template already. So for example, I did my PhD at the University of Toronto, and I can just click this here to import the University of Toronto standard thesis with all of the requirements for formatting already in there. So definitely check out the gallery to see if your university is here or if there's just a template you really like. So for the purpose of this video, we're gonna go and just click on a blank project and let's call it YouTube Thesis. All right, this is a wonderful PhD thesis that we're gonna have. I'm going to hide the left-hand menu for now. And what I want to notice is that there's 2 sides to this. On the left-hand side, we get our code. And then when we click the compile button, it spits out, well, what it's gonna look like. And right now, we have almost nothing. So there's a few things I'm gonna do right off the bat. The document class is currently default set to be article, and I'm gonna change this to report. And when I compile that, already it changes the look and feel. There's a title page here, and then we have this beginning section, which is called introduction. It appears on a new page. Basically, reports are designed for longer documents than just an article was. There's other classes like book, which is reasonable as well, but I'm gonna use report. Now, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to change this title, which I have as YouTube Thesis. That was the name of the document, and that's totally fine. But I want to add perhaps a university there. So I'm going to open a new section of braces here. I'm going to give it the size, and there's lots of different sizes you can do. I'm going to choose large, which is actually a little bit smaller than the size that's set for the YouTube Thesis already. And I'm going to call it the University of YouTube, the most prestigious university in the world. And we get YouTube Thesis and then University of YouTube. I don't like that that's all in one line, so I'm going to come to YouTube Thesis. The double backslash allows me to end the line, and I have a slightly better title. Now I can make this title page look fancier and nicer, but that's what we have for right now. And I want to notice that the actual body of the thesis is all going to go between the begin document and the end document. The only 2 things I have there right now is a section called Make Title, which just makes the title page. That's what the purpose is. All of that data that was collected here above the begin document. Now that's turned into a title page. And then I have this new section, and if I scroll down here, I can see this new section. Okay, now the first thing I want to do is I'm actually going to get rid of this section here, this introduction. We're going to deal with that a little bit later, because in a thesis, there's usually a few things that happen before the introduction. And the first of those is the abstract. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set \chapter, and because I do not want my abstract and other things that go ahead of the main body of the thesis, like a dedication and an acknowledgement, because I don't want those to have chapter numbers, I'm going to go chapter star, and the star just says don't give this a chapter number. Then I'm going to go and give abstract, and we can type whatever our thesis is going to be about. I can scroll down, and now I have a section called abstract, which contains a little bit of content. Probably it would be a little bit longer if you were trying to write a whole PhD thesis. Same basic idea. I can do the same chapter with the star to say I don't want to enumerate it. Maybe I want to make it a dedication page. And I can say, for my subscribers. And maybe I would also like to have a chat per. Let's change that. Chapter, that's better. Chapter that's going to be called acknowledgements. Overleaf, by the way, here is really nice. It has a spell checker built in, so you see how it's got the red line here saying there's something wrong. I right click and I can just do my spell check. So it's got those sort of like slightly nicer features that surprisingly a lot of LaTeX editors still don't have. Nevertheless, I want to thank, and then you can fill that in. Okay, so let's compile that. Overleaf actually has a pretty cool feature. If you get tired of clicking this recompile button, you can come down and click auto compile on, and it's just going to regularly be doing that. But basically, it does the equivalent of clicking that button for you. Regardless, we have our title page, we have our abstract, and we have our dedication, and then finally our acknowledgements. And that's all before we get to the body of the thesis, which is empty. I really like using folders because if you can think about a thesis, it's going to get really, really long. And if I try to put the entire thesis in this one document, like every single thing that I'm ever going to have in the thesis is all in one document, it's going to be too much. It's just going to be extremely long. So one of the things I like to do over here is come and make separate chapters in separate files. That allows you to move the chapters around and just open up one chapter and just deal with that and only compile one chapter at once if you so choose. So what I'm going to do is in my folder, I'm going to click a new file and I'm going to call it, how about CH for chapter, and then I'll say something like CH YouTube buttons or something silly like this. And this creates this other tex file, not the main.tex file, it's in a separate one. Let's make another one like chapter, I don't know, subscribers. I'm just sort of using YouTube words as the standard names here. And if I open one of these, they're just blank documents. So if I want to actually fill them in, I have to add something. So I'm going to make this one, how about this is going to be a chapter. And in this chapter, I actually want it to be enumerated. I want it to be chapter 1, so I'm not going to put the star there. And so I'm going to call it YouTube buttons. And maybe this chapter has 3 different sections. It's going to have one section called the subscribe button. It's going to have a section called the like button. And what other, oh yeah, I know we have a section on the notification bell, all the good YouTube stuff. Okay, so it's going there and compiling. So now what's happened? Well, in the document, there's no notion of this. I mean, I can scroll up and down through my document, I don't see it. So what I have to do is to make this connected with my document, I go back to main. Okay, so what I type is \include. And I really love this about Overleaf. It's so smart because it pops down this contextual menu of all the different things that I might want to include. Well, I have 2 different tex files that are chapters, the subscribers and the YouTube buttons ones. So I'm going to click the YouTube buttons one because that's the one I've added content to. I'm going to wait for it to recompile. And it tells me that I have an error. I really like this about Overleaf. So I had that error. I'm going to click and try to figure it out. It says, I suspect you have forgotten a closing curly brace, and this happened at the spot include CH YouTube buttons. So let's go to that thing and see what's going on here. And indeed, right there, chapter YouTube buttons, I never put that closed curly brace on it. So now when I recompile, thank you Overleaf for showing me those error messages and explaining to me what my silliness was. I get my abstract, I get my dedication, I get my acknowledgements, and now I have chapter 1, the YouTube buttons chapter, which includes these 3 subsections, the subscribe button, the like button, and the notification bell. And And what I really want to notice here is how much is being done automatically by LaTeX. LaTeX is choosing this enumeration, chapter 1 and 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. It's choosing all of this style. Now, if you don't like any of this style, there's ways to tweak all of it. If you don't think this is the look that you're going for, we can tweak all of this. But the point is, you can tweak it in one place and it's going to affect the entire document and the style of everything. It's not like you're going and increasing the font size at one spot that you might forget about later on and be inconsistent about. Okay, so that's my beginning. Let's just keep on going. I better add at least something to this subscribers.tex file. I'll make this a new chapter called How I Got 100K Subscribers. And I'll say section, and I'll call it Make Funny YouTube Puns. This is clearly the main trick. And this is not connected, so I've got to go back to that main. I've got the chapter on YouTube buttons. I'll go /include. Again, Overleaf is going to pop up the options. And when I scroll down, I have this other chapter, How I Made 100 Subscribers by Doing Funny YouTube Puns. So you can make as many chapters as you want. You can reorder them however you wish. It just makes it really, really easy. Now, as you get lots of chapters and lots of sections, you very well will want an actual table of contents. So let me show you how to do this. So what I have on the left is I have these 3 chapters that I'm including in the main.tex file, and then I've included these external chapters where most of my thesis is going to be. So the standard spot that you put your table of contents is actually after your acknowledgements here. The command we want to use here is /table of contents, and if I compile this, okay, let's see what happens. Well, I have this nice table of contents. It shows me Chapter 1 is my YouTube buttons chapter. It's got those 3 different sections. Chapter 2 is my How I Got 100K Subscribers, and it has its particular section. And you can see it's keeping track of the page numbers here. So page 5, page 6, and so forth. Now, while we're talking about chapters, let's do a couple more things. I'm going to make a conclusions chapter. Nothing particularly fancy. I'm just going to /chapter and conclusions. You can choose to enumerate this one or not. It's a little bit up to you. And then I'm also going to make one, the thing that often goes after a conclusion is appendices. And appendices are pretty much the same thing. So I'm going to write an appendix. Sometimes you're going to have multiple things like appendix A, appendix B. I'm just going to do one here. And for the appendix, it looks just like a chapter, at least for now. So I'm going to go chapter, and I'll call this one appendix. So I've added 2 things, the conclusion and the appendix. I'm going to go back to main. Now look what I do for this. I want to include these into my document. So I'm going to go /include, and I'm going to first add that conclusions button. Nothing that happens much there, but I want to do something for the appendix. And the idea is I want to separate what chapters are thought of as the main part of the thesis and what chapters are thought of as the appendix. So to separate these, I write /appendix. And now when I include a chapter, it's going to be just interpreted a little bit different. So let's do the exact same thing. I'm going to include the appendix. Thank you, Overleaf, for popping this out. And let me go and compile everything and watch what happens to the table of contents. The conclusion was given a chapter. Because I didn't put the star in the /chapter, it now is given a chapter number. It's chapter 3, according to this enumeration. But look at appendix. Appendix starts at A. So the trick is that when you went over here and used this /appendix, it basically resets the enumeration and turns it to using alphabetical enumeration, not numerical enumeration. So now I have this appendix A, and I can have appendix B, C, D, and so forth. Now, I want to share with you a couple of Overleaf's premium features that just are extremely, extremely nice. The first of these is just the ability to have a whole bunch of collaborators. If you want to have a whole bunch of collaborators, like you've got a whole research team with you, or you have multiple different advisors who are on your thesis committee, well, then it's really nice just to be able to share it with them. So this is entirely possible with Overleaf. You just add whoever it is that you want to be, and you can decide whether they're going to be able to edit it, or they're just going to be able to read it, and then they can just contribute into your document. The other feature, and I think this one is so incredibly nice, is the ability to go and look at your history. So I can come here, and you can see on the right-hand side here, I have a lot of different changes, and I can go back to previous states of my different sections of my different documents. So for example, recently I was playing around with the YouTube button one. So if I open the top one, it looks exactly like we had it before. If I go to chapter YouTube buttons from a while ago, okay, back on 1:55 p.m., Now I get the version of it that doesn't have all of that stuff with figures. So if I want to go back in the past and figure out what's happening, well, then I can do that. I can compare this to a different version. I can label my version so I can sort of keep track of them. And it makes it very nice for over the course of years of developing a thesis for you to figure out like what's happening. There's no worry. You're going to accidentally delete something crucial and you'll have missed something that you'd worked on years ago. You have your history, you're safe. Okay, so that's the basic structure, but let's try adding some content. And perhaps the most important thing is any figures that you might make. How do we deal with that? Now, in the previous video on LaTeX, I've talked about just creating a figure before, but I really want to talk more about figure management. How do I deal with having lots of figures in this particular video? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new subfolder, and this is going to be called images. And so here it is. I can go inside of my images and I have this new folder. Then if I click on it, I'm going to upload and let me go and find some images. I've created 3 images already, like, notification, and subscribe, and I'm going to open them and they're loaded in. And now if I expand my images, I have my 3 files there. Now, to actually get these images into your document, I actually need to use a new package. So I'm back here in main.tech and I'm going to do I want to use package, and I'm going to use one called graphic with an X at the end. This is the same one I've talked about in my previous video. It just allows me to include nice figures. Now, the place I'm going to go is in my chapter on YouTube buttons, and the command here is going to be \begin figure, and I want to just let Overleaf expand all of the different data, and so let's come along and put this in. There's a few things in here you need to fill in. So the first of them is going to be, where's your actual image? And so if I expand what my images were, I have my different buttons. I'm in the subscribe button one, so let me go and write it this way. I go inside my brackets and I go images, and as you see, it's already starting to pop it up, and I'm going to go to the subscribe button. Then I need to give it some sort of caption, and I'm going to call the caption the subscribe button. I need to give it a label. This is so that you can internally reference it. Let's call it subscribe. I've talked about how to internally reference it before. And all right, there we go. Let's go and see what this looks like. So going to number 1, you see that it says subscribe button, like button, notification bell, and then I have this image down at the bottom. And you might be like, hold on, I don't want that image down at the bottom here, because it's sort of weird here that with the 3 sections in a row, they all have no content. They all go in then the image that it was meant to be associated with the subscribe button. And the issue here is that if you don't do anything else, then LaTeX is going to automatically position your figures in a nice place in the document, opposed to maybe exactly where you want it. So I can fix this by adding a parameter to the begin figure. This is something I haven't talked about previously. I'm going to go and do, in brackets, the H command. This parameter H just means here, and there's other ones like T, which is the top of the page, or B, which is the bottom of the page. Now if I recompile it with that little extra bit there, the button appears exactly where I want. Let me copy everything, and I'm going to do basically the same thing for the like button, basically the same for the subscribe button, but I'm just going to change the names. Okay, I think I've cleaned everything up. Let's compile that. And I believe I now have a subscribe button, looks nice, a like button, looks nice, a notification bell, and then it appears in the middle of the page. Now, LaTeX is actually a little bit not liking of this. It gives me a bit of a view warning that says maybe it would be better to specify it as HT, which stands for here and top if possible. It doesn't like that, and so I can come here on that one since it seems to be causing a bit of a problem, and it will take this error message away. It's not going to display it because, again, there's just no content on the next page, so it's just going to nicely put it in the middle just to keep everything nice and centralized. And what I really like about it is that the enumeration, like figure 1.1 and 1.2 here, these are, which by the way, these are being enumerated at the level of chapters right now. It's just a coincidence that I have one image per section, but they're being enumerated at the level of chapters. I might want to have a lot of these in my document, and I might want to keep track of them somehow. So what I can do is I can go back over here to main, and right underneath my table of contents, I can go / and I write list of figures. And if I do that, it's going to have this nice way to underneath, so here's my list of figures right there, table of contents, then list of figures, and you can see exactly where they're going to be. So this is very convenient. You can do the same kind of idea. You could have a list of tables or other different items. And in a long thesis, having these organizational structural components can just make it a lot nicer for you or for the reader of your thesis to be able to figure out what's going on. All right. We're doing well. I think I want to now turn to one of the most interesting parts, which is the bibliography. So I'm going to expand so I can see my list of files one more time. And what I'm going to do here is I want to create a new file, and I'm going to call it my references. But normally all of my files have been .tex files, .txx files. I'm going to call this one a .bib file for bibliography. And bibliographies are the one major part of a thesis that are just a little bit different. We're going to have a different type of file, not a tex file, a .bib file. So I'm going to create that, and it appears down here. So if I go into this, I'm actually just copying and pasted from one I have found online. I'm going to copy and paste Einstein's special relativity paper. And what I want to notice is that your .bib file, it doesn't impose a type of formatting. The .bib file is just collecting information. This is the author, this is the title, this is the journal, this is the year. And what that means is that you're not spending a whole bunch of time precisely formatting exactly how your bibliography works the way you might on Microsoft Word, where you're like, this has to be bolded and this has to be underlined. You're just collecting the data here, and there's a standard way to do this. Now, figuring out the exact syntax for how you collect the data for making these bibliography files is actually not going to be done in this video, but I'm going to put a detailed link from Overlink down in the description so you can see exactly how to do this. Personally, I actually think that you shouldn't manually create your .bib files because Overleaf actually syncs with a number of external bibliography softwares, things like Zotero, where you can be collecting all of the references for your thesis in one spot, and it's going to make these .bib files for you. So I'm going to put the information to that down in the description and basically say, go and figure out how to make your bibliography files. What I will cover, though, is now that I've made this bibliography file, how do I actually put it back into my document? So as usual, I'm going to go back to the main. My bibliography is going to be after my appendix here, and there's going to be two different components to it. The first thing is I need to specify the style. So I'm going to say bibliography style. And you have a lot of options here because bibliographies can be formatted in many different ways. There's many different styles, and your university may have a specific one that it wants. I'm just going to use a plain one because it's just nice and, not a plain without an E at the end, because it's just nice and simple. So that just sets the style. It's basically saying, how do you interpret that .bib file to display it nicely? Again, there's lots of different standards here. Then I'm going to say bibliography, and well, there's only one bibliography file that we have. It's the one called reference. So my bibliography is this ref file. I'm going to compile that and let's see what we have. Now, there's one little thing, which is when I go to this, it doesn't look like there's anything there. I mean, if I go to my ref, I had this reference for Einstein, but there's nothing in the bibliography. And the reason is that I haven't used that particular reference in my document. So, okay, where should I go? Let's go to the subscriber chapter, say. And I don't know why in making YouTube buttons we would talk about special relativity, but I can reference, say, Einstein. And the way I do this is as follows. I go /cite, and then notice that Overleaf is looking through your files here. It says the only thing you can really cite here is Einstein, and I'm going, oops, I didn't mean to hit the period there. I'll put the period there. Now when I compile it, it will change in two places. The first thing here is that under the bibliography, I have used that Einstein bibliography reference, and so there it is. The second thing is if I scroll back up to my chapter 2, see what happens. I can reference Einstein, and then it says a little 1 there, 1 referring to the fact that you've got a 1 down there. This is what is so nice about LaTeX. Everything is just kept track of, right? As you change the number of citations throughout your document, all of that enumeration will be completely automatic. Everything will link up appropriately, and you'll be able to deal with your references. I want to show you one final really nice killer feature about Overleaf. If you click this review button, and this is really just pretty special to Overleaf, I'm going to go, it says track changes is off. I'm going to click this toggle, and now track changes is going to be on. And so imagine I come along here and do something, and I'll get rid of that panel. And let me imagine I do something like I am going to expand this. Now, when you have this track changes on, you get to see what is the new thing that you are doing right now as you're adding to your document. And indeed, if I click on this review, I can come along and make a change. Like, for example, one of your collaborators can be like, I think you should add this. And now you have the option to just choose, do you want to accept it or do you want to reject it? And so this is one of the killer features of Overleaf that allows to have multiple people collaborating on the same document, or even just yourself. You want to see what you've been doing at your different iterations of writing, and allows you to track all of those changes. It's like the history, but on steroids. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is how do we deal with footnotes? I'm going to make a new line over here, and I want to do a footnote right here. Okay. So let me say that I want to have something that appears at the bottom of the page. I'm going to go backslash, and I'm going to say footnote. I know, shocker. And then I write in whatever it is. This is, like, I don't know, this is my first footnote. Very exciting. Okay, let's run that. Now I had to figure out where in our document I'm going to be. I believe I was in chapter 2 here, so there it is. I can reference Einstein. I've done that first. Then it says, I want to do a footnote right here. And you'll notice it says, I want to do a footnote right here. It puts a little bit of a 1 with different formatting than the formatting for references. Again, there are ways to change all of these looks if you so wish, but this is how it's done it sort of natively. And then down at the bottom, this is my first footnote. Now, if I have a really long footnote, I might not want to define it right in the middle of some other sentence, or it might be the case that I want to refer to the same footnote multiple times in a row. And I can do that with something called footnote mark. So I can use backslash footnote mark to make a placeholder and not define it until later. Then to define it later, I'll do backslash footnote text. And this is saying, what is the text of that footnote? And I will say, this is my second footnote. And let's see what happens when I do it. I can use 2. Notice that there's a space here, so it looks a little bit weird. I really prefer to have that there so that the 2 is right on top of the U's. That looks a little better. Now the 2 is right beside the U's. But then I didn't define it till later, and if I go down at the bottom, this is my first footnote, and this is my second footnote. And then if you want to have multiple marks for the same footnote, I can use this command. It's footnote mark, and then it goes inside of a parameter. It puts in value footnote, so it just says put in the same reference basically that you had before. And if I do that, now I'm going to get that 2 twice. So you see how I can use 2 and then until later 2. The same 2 is referred to here, and then it's defined to be whatever this footnote text is. Now, the final thing I want to do is talk about how can I organize the layout of the entire thesis. Things like margins on the left and the right and the top and the bottom, as well as dealing with things like printing. So the first thing I'm going to do is go back to the very beginning where it said document class and I included a report. But I'm going to put inside of my square brackets that allows it to feed into parameter, I'm going to write two-side. And first of all, I just think you should always be printing your thesis two-sided just to save paper. And this just allows that to be done this way, to note that there's going to be 2 different sides to this. You could also use a spot to make the font larger or smaller, or you can add many extra different parameters to this document class here. Now, I have to add a new package to deal with margins. I'm going to use the following package, use package, and it's called the geometry package. And I can specify now all of my margins within here. So I'm going to copy and paste something called new geometry, and I specify the top to be 3/4 of an inch, the bottom to be 3/4 of an inch, the outer to be 3/4 of an inch, and the inner to be specified as 3/4 of an inch. This is also a spot where you might want to change what type of paper. So for example, it defaults to letter, but if you want A4 or legal, you can specify all of this with the geometry package. Now, I'm going to do one thing. I haven't actually written a lot of text anywhere, so I'm going to add a generic, it's kind of a funny one that people who use LaTeX a lot do. It's called lipsum, and lipsum is just a package that has a generic large amount of text. I'll show you what I mean. And then I'm going to go down here, /lipsum, and then in square brackets, I'll write 1 to 20. So this is just going to give the first, I think, 20 lines of this. Let's see what it looks like. Well, here's the following. It's just a whole bunch of, I guess this is Latin text. And this is just a trick to be able to generate, well, a lot of text. So you can sort of see what it looks like. Now that I have a bunch of text there, this will be your actual content there. It nicely does this indenting of the first line when it's trying to make paragraphs. But notice the difference. I mean, I've now zoomed out so you can see the whole thing. Notice how the margin on the left is way smaller than the margin on the right. This, despite the fact that if I go back to my main text file here, and basically what's happened here is that I've specified the outer margin to be 0.75 an inch and the inner margin to be 1.75. And that's because I've said it was two-sided. So I want, when you put it two-sided together and you look at it, say it's being nicely binded into the book, that inner margin here will be 0.75 plus the other 0.75 to the 1.5 inches. So basically on this page, this is going to be an inner margin, that's going to be an outer margin. Let's go down one page, it's exactly reversed, outer margin and inner margin. This allows you to print it into some binded document, and on the columns will look really nice. The exact amounts of these margins, please do look up your university specifications here, but this geometry package allows you to control them. Now, there is a lot more that I can tell you about, and one of the things I've been doing in this particular video and in the previous ones is not using a huge amount of packages. Packages are all these little extra things that you can add that give new functionality. And so in the next video, I'm going to share with you a bunch of my favorite packages that I use all the time that I think can really superpower your LaTeX documents and make them just awesome. Allow you to customize so many of the different things and just make it that much more pretty. So that and more coming up in the next video. And if you enjoyed this one, please do give it a like for the YouTube algorithm. If you have any questions or thoughts about LaTeX, leave them down in the comments below. All the links to many of the different topics that I've talked about are down in the description. Check out Overleaf. This is a long call to action, and we'll do some more math in the next video.